The dream came to Benjamin Harper 3 nights in a row before he decided to risk his reputation on what most men would call foolishness. Each night, the same vision. A woman with auburn hair standing in a room filled with books, sunlight streaming through a window behind her, painting her in gold. She turned toward him, her green eyes recognizing something in him he had not yet found in himself. And when she smiled, Benjamin felt a pull so strong it woke him gasping in the darkness of his rented room above the saloon in Santa Fe, New Mexico territory. Benjamin was not a man given to flights of fancy. At 27, he had spent the better part of a decade working cattle drives from Texas up to Kansas, earning a reputation as someone reliable, steady, and practical. His fellow cowboys respected him because he kept his word and never let emotion override good sense. Yet here, he was on a Tuesday morning in September 1882, saddling his bay mare and preparing to follow nothing more substantial than a feeling that had burrowed into his chest and refused to let go. "You are making a mistake," his trail boss, Miguel Sandoval, said as Benjamin checked his saddlebags one final time. "We have work here. Good pay. You throw it away for what?" "A dream." "I cannot explain it," Benjamin admitted, adjusting his hat against the morning sun. "But I know if I do not go, I will regret it the rest of my life." Miguel shook his head but clasped Benjamin's hand firmly. "Then go with God. But when this fancy passes and you need work again, you come find me." Benjamin rode out of Santa Fe with enough supplies for 2 weeks, and a map that showed him precious little about where he was actually going. The dream offered no address, no town name, nothing concrete except the certainty that pulsed through his veins telling him to head east. He had learned long ago to trust his instincts when it came to reading the land and weather. Perhaps instinct worked for other things too. The terrain shifted as he crossed from New Mexico territory into Texas, the landscape opening up in ways that made his chest expand with each breath. He stopped in small towns along the way, places barely more than a general store and a few scattered buildings, asking questions he was not entirely sure how to phrase. "I am looking for a bookshop," he would say, and people would stare at him as though he had asked for the moon. Books were scarce out here, precious things ordered from back east and treasured when they arrived. The idea of an entire shop dedicated to them seemed absurd this far from civilization. But Benjamin pressed on, following that inexplicable pull that grew stronger with each mile. He worked odd jobs when his money ran low, helping a rancher repair fencing outside of Pico's, spending 3 days breaking horses for a widow whose husband had died the previous winter. Each time, he asked about books, about shops, about a woman who might sell them. "You are chasing a ghost," the widow told him as she paid him for the horse work. "There is nothing like that out here." "Maybe," Benjamin replied, "but I have to know for certain." He crossed into the Davis Mountains, the air cooling as elevation increased, and something in his chest tightened with recognition, even though he had never been to this part of Texas before. The town of Fort Davis appeared almost suddenly, nestled in a valley with the mountains rising protective on all sides. It was larger than many of the places he had passed through, established around the military fort that gave it its name, though the fort itself had been abandoned just the year before. Benjamin rode down the main street slowly, his eyes scanning each building. A hotel, a saloon, a general store, a bank, a church with a white steeple. Normal frontier town businesses serving normal frontier needs. He felt disappointment begin to creep in, cold and unwelcome. Perhaps Miguel had been right. Perhaps this had been nothing but foolishness after all. Then he saw it. The building sat at the end of the street, slightly set back from the others. The sign above the door read Kensington Books in neat, painted letters. Benjamin's heart hammered so hard against his ribs he thought it might crack them. His hands trembled as he dismounted, tying his mare to the hitching post with fingers that did not want to cooperate. The door was propped open to let in the September breeze. Benjamin removed his hat and stepped inside, and the smell hit him first. Paper and leather and something floral he could not name. Then his eyes adjusted to the dimmer interior, and he saw the shelves lining every wall. Books stacked spine out in neat rows, more books than he had seen in his entire life gathered in one place. And there, behind a counter near the back, stood the woman from his dreams. She was reading, her head bent over a leather-bound volume, one finger tracing the words as her lips moved silently. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple bun, though strands had escaped to curl around her face. She wore a practical brown dress with a cream-colored shawl around her shoulders. Everything about her was exactly as he had seen, down to the way the light from the window painted her in gold. Benjamin must have made some sound because she looked up. Her green eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Benjamin felt as though he had been struck by lightning, every nerve in his body alive and singing. The woman's lips parted, and he saw her hand tighten on the edge of the counter as though she needed something solid to hold on to. "Can I help you?" Her voice was softer than he had imagined, with an accent that spoke of education and somewhere back east. Benjamin realized he was staring and forced himself to speak. "I apologize for intruding. I was passing through and saw your shop." The words felt inadequate, ridiculous even. How could he possibly explain that he had ridden across two territories because of dreams? The woman's expression shifted into something more welcoming, though he could still see caution in her eyes. A woman alone running a business out here would have learned to be careful. "You are not intruding at all. That is what the shop is for. Are you looking for anything in particular?" Benjamin stepped further inside, his hat clasped in both hands. "Truth be told, I am not much of a reader, but I have never seen a bookshop before, not like this." "There are not many west of St. Louis," she acknowledged. She closed her book and moved around the counter, and Benjamin noticed she favored her right leg slightly, the barest hint of a limp. "I am Sophia Kensington. I opened this shop 6 months ago. Benjamin Harper." He should shake her hand, but he felt frozen in place, afraid that if he moved too quickly, this would all dissolve like morning mist. This must have been quite an undertaking, bringing all these books out here. Sophia smiled, and it was the smile from his dreams, warm and genuine and lit with an intelligence that made his pulse quicken. "It was rather impractical, according to everyone I consulted, but I find people need books just as much out here as they do anywhere else. Perhaps more, actually. Life is hard, and stories provide a respite." Benjamin found himself walking along the shelves, studying the titles even though many of the words meant nothing to him. His education had been practical and limited, focused on reading enough to get by and cipher enough to not be cheated. "Did you come from back east, Boston?" Sophia followed a few steps behind him, her skirts rustling softly. "I came west 3 years ago with my father. He was a doctor, and he wanted to serve the soldiers at Fort Davis. When he died last year, I found myself alone with his medical library and a good deal of time to think about what I wanted from life. I am sorry for your loss." Benjamin turned to face her, seeing the flash of grief that crossed her features before she composed herself. "Thank you. He was a good man. He taught me that education should not be hoarded, that knowledge shared is knowledge multiplied." She gestured around the shop. "So I sold what I could of his medical books to other doctors and used the money to order inventory from Eastern publishers." People thought I was mad, but within the first month, I had a dozen regular customers. There is a hunger for reading material out here that most people do not realize exists. Benjamin believed it. He had seen men on the trail carry the same tattered dime novel for months, reading and rereading until they had memorized every word. "What do you like to read?" The question seemed to surprise her. Her smile widened, reaching her eyes in a way that made Benjamin's chest ache. "Everything." "Novels, certainly. Poetry. Scientific treatises, though I confess much of the mathematics eludes me. History, philosophy, adventure stories. I find I cannot choose favorites any more than I could choose a favorite star in the sky." They talked for over an hour. Benjamin kept thinking he should leave, should let this woman get back to her work, but every time he made to go, Sophia would mention another book or ask him a question that kept the conversation flowing. She wanted to know about cattle drives, about what he had seen in his travels. She listened with genuine interest as he described the vastness of the plains, the way thunderstorms rolled across the horizon like advancing armies, the peculiar beauty of dawn breaking over empty land. "You describe it like poetry," Sophia said at one point. "You should write these observations down," Benjamin laughed. "I am no writer. Neither are most people until they try." She pulled a small journal from a shelf, bound in simple brown leather. "Take this. Consider it a gift for being my first interesting customer of the day." "I cannot accept that without paying." "Then pay me by filling it with your observations." Sophia pressed the journal into his hands, and when their fingers brushed, Benjamin felt that same electric jolt that had struck him when he first saw her. From the way her breath caught, he thought she might have felt it too. "I am staying at the hotel," Benjamin said, the words tumbling out before he could think better of them. "I was planning to find work around here for a while. If you would like, I could help with any heavy lifting or repairs you might need around the shop. Payment for the journal." Sophia studied him for a long moment, and he could see her weighing the offer, considering the propriety of it. Finally, she nodded. "The roof leaks in 2 places when it rains, and there are some shelves in the back room I have been unable to mount myself. If you truly do not mind, I would appreciate the help." Benjamin minded nothing less in his entire life. Over the following days, he fell into a routine that felt more right than anything he had experienced before. Mornings, he worked odd jobs around Fort Davis, taking whatever was offered. The town was rebuilding itself after the fort's closure, with many families deciding to stay despite the military's departure. There was always work for someone willing to do it. Construction, hauling, helping at the livery stable. Afternoons, he spent at Sophia's bookshop, repairing the roof, building the shelves, fixing a loose board in the floor that she had been stepping around for months. They talked while he worked. Sophia would read passages from books aloud, pausing to explain references he did not understand or to laugh at something particularly clever. She told him about Boston, about growing up the only child of a widowed doctor who had raised her more like a son than a daughter, teaching her to think critically and question everything. "He scandalized his colleagues by educating me so thoroughly," she said one afternoon while Benjamin hammered a new shelf into place. "Women are supposed to be ornamental and agreeable, not opinionated and well-read." I drove away more than one potential suitor with my insistence on discussing politics and science. "Their loss," Benjamin said, and meant it. Sophia looked at him with something soft in her expression. "You are different from most men I have encountered." "How so?" "You listen. Truly listen, not just wait for your turn to speak, and you do not seem threatened by the fact that I know things you do not." Benjamin paused his hammering to meet her eyes. "Why would I be threatened? You knowing things means I can learn from you. That seems like a gift." The look she gave him then made his heart race. In the evenings, Benjamin found himself writing in the journal she had given him, trying to capture in words the things he saw and felt. He wrote about the sunset turning the mountains purple and gold. He wrote about the way Sophia's voice softened when she read poetry. He wrote about the terrifying, exhilarating feeling of knowing he had found something he had not realized he was missing until it appeared before him. Fort Davis welcomed him more easily than he had expected. The town was full of people who had come from somewhere else, all of them trying to build something new in this harsh, beautiful landscape. He helped the blacksmith repair a wagon axle and ended up invited to dinner. He assisted the owner of the general store with inventory and was offered standing work whenever he wanted it. But it was Sophia who occupied his thoughts. Sophia who made him believe in things he had previously dismissed as romantic nonsense. One evening, nearly 2 weeks after his arrival, Benjamin walked Sophia home from the bookshop. She lived in a small house on the edge of town, the same house where her father had maintained his practice. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed almost too vivid to be real. "May I ask you something?" Sophia said as they walked slowly along the dirt road. "And please know you need not answer if it is too personal. Ask anything." "Why did you really come to Fort Davis? You mentioned passing through, but you have stayed, and I have watched you, Benjamin Harper. You ask after work like a man planning to put down roots, not like someone just wandering." Benjamin took a deep breath. He had known this question would come eventually. He owed her honesty, even if it made him sound mad. "I dreamed about you. 3 nights in a row I saw you in a bookshop. I did not know where or how to find you, but I knew I had to try. So I followed a feeling that led me here." He braced himself for disbelief, for mockery, for the rational dismissal such a confession deserved. Instead, Sophia stopped walking and turned to face him fully, her eyes searching his face in the fading light. "I dreamed too," she whispered. "For weeks before you arrived, I dreamed of a man with kind eyes and work-worn hands who would look at me like I was more precious than all the books in the world. I thought I was being foolish, that grief had made me lonely enough to create fantasies. But then you walked into my shop and I knew you." Benjamin reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. When she did not, he took her hand in his, marveling at how perfectly it fit. "I do not understand how this is possible." "Neither do I." Sophia's voice trembled slightly. "But I have learned that some things transcend understanding. Sometimes you must simply trust in what you feel." "And what do you feel?" She stepped closer, and he could see the reflection of the sunset in her eyes. "Like I have been waiting my entire life for you to find me." Benjamin kissed her then, softly and reverently, as though sealing a promise neither of them had yet spoken aloud. She tasted like peppermint tea and felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. When they parted, both of them were trembling. "I have no great wealth to offer you," Benjamin said, his forehead resting against hers. "I am just a cowboy with practical skills and a habit of chasing dreams, but I would spend every day of my life trying to make you happy if you would let me." "I do not need wealth," Sophia replied. "I need someone who sees me as I am and loves me anyway. Someone who will talk with me and listen to me and build a life with me that matters. I think you could be that person, Benjamin Harper." "I know you are that person for me, Sophia Kensington." They stood there on the dusty road as the stars began to emerge overhead, holding each other and marveling at the mystery of how 2 people from different worlds could be drawn together by something as insubstantial and powerful as dreams. The courtship that followed was sweet and proper by the standards of Fort Davis society. though Benjamin knew in his heart that the commitment between them had been sealed the moment they first saw each other. He continued his work around town, saving money with new purpose now. Sophia introduced him to her favorite customers, and he found himself drawn into a community of readers who welcomed him despite his limited education. Mrs. Chen, who ran the boarding house, lent him books from her personal collection and discussed them with him patiently. Reverend Morrison, the Methodist minister, encouraged Benjamin to attend the town's weekly discussion group where residents debated philosophy and current events. Even the former soldiers who had stayed after the fort closed accepted him, appreciating his work ethic and straightforward manner. Through it all, Benjamin and Sophia grew closer. He learned that she favored her right leg because of a childhood accident, a fall from a horse that had shattered her hip. The doctors had done what they could, but she would carry the limp forever. She told him this matter-of-factly, watching his face for any sign of revulsion or pity. "Does it cause you pain?" Benjamin asked. "Sometimes, when the weather changes or I have been standing too long. Then I will help you notice when the weather is changing, and I will remind you to rest." He kissed her forehead. "Your leg is simply part of you, Sophia, and I love all of you." She cried at that, happy tears that she pressed into his shoulder while he held her. Benjamin learned that Sophia sang while she worked, usually songs from her childhood that she only half remembered. He learned that she was fiercely protective of the children who came into her shop, often giving them books she knew they could not afford because she believed literacy was a right, not a privilege. He learned that she had a temper when roused, particularly when it came to injustice, and that she had once publicly berated a customer who suggested that the Mexican families in Fort Davis should not be taught to read. "Education is the greatest equalizer we have," she had declared, loud enough for half the town to hear. "And if you believe otherwise, you can take your business elsewhere." The customer had left in a huff, but 3 more had entered specifically to support her afterward. Benjamin loved her fire, her conviction, her unwavering belief that people deserved better than the limited lives society tried to assign them. Sophia, for her part, discovered that Benjamin had a dry sense of humor that emerged once he felt comfortable. She learned that he was patient beyond measure, never pushing her for more than she was ready to give. She learned that he noticed small things, when she was tired, when something troubled her, when she needed silence instead of conversation. He brought her coffee in the morning without being asked and fixed things around the shop before she realized they needed fixing. "You anticipate needs before they arise," she told him one day. "That is a rare gift." "I spent years on cattle drives reading animals and weather," Benjamin replied. "I suppose I just apply the same attention to you, though you are significantly more complex than a steer." She laughed, the sound filling the bookshop with joy. 3 months after Benjamin arrived in Fort Davis, he asked Sophia to marry him. They were in the shop after closing, the November twilight casting long shadows across the floor. Benjamin had been rehearsing speeches in his head for days, trying to find words adequate to express what he felt. In the end, he simply knelt before her and took her hands in his. "Sophia Kensington, I followed instinct and dreams across 2 territories to find you, and now that I have, I cannot imagine my life without you in it. You have shown me that a man can be more than his work, that there is beauty in words and wisdom in books and magic in the connection between 2 souls who recognize each other. Will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my days proving that I am worthy of the gift you have given me?" Sophia was crying again, the happy tears that he had learned to recognize. "Yes, yes, of course yes. You already are worthy, Benjamin. You proved that by having the courage to follow your heart when every practical voice must have told you to ignore it." They were married in January 1883 by Reverend Morrison in the Methodist Church, with what seemed like half the town in attendance. Mrs. Chen baked the cake. The blacksmith fashioned wedding rings from silver ore mined in the nearby mountains. Former soldiers from the closed fort stood as groomsmen, friends Benjamin had made during his months in Fort Davis. Sophia's customers became her bridesmaids, women of various ages who had come to see the bookshop as a haven and Sophia as a friend. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Benjamin spoke his vows in a steady voice, promising to love and honor Sophia for all the days of his life. Sophia's voice trembled with emotion as she promised the same, her green eyes never leaving his face. When Reverend Morrison pronounced them married, the kiss they shared was chaste enough for public consumption, but carried the promise of all the intimacy to come. The reception was held in the bookshop, which Sophia insisted was the only appropriate venue. People spilled out into the street, celebrating with music and dancing and food that everyone had contributed. Benjamin danced with his bride, marveling at how she felt in his arms, at the fact that this extraordinary woman had chosen him. "What are you thinking?" Sophia asked as they swayed together, her head resting against his chest. "That I am the luckiest man alive, that I would chase 1,000 dreams if they all led me to you. You only needed to chase one," she replied, "but I am glad you did." They spent their wedding night in Sophia's house, which had become their house, and Benjamin discovered that the physical expression of their love was as profound and perfect as everything else about their connection. Sophia was both shy and bold, curious and certain. He was gentle and attentive, wanting nothing more than her pleasure and happiness. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, and Sophia traced patterns on his chest with her fingertips. "I never thought I would have this," she whispered. "In Boston, I was too educated, too opinionated, too damaged with my leg. Every man who courted me wanted someone different from who I am. And then you arrived, having literally dreamed me into existence, and you loved me exactly as I am." Benjamin caught her hand and brought it to his lips. "You are not damaged, Sophia. You are perfect, and any man too foolish to see that did not deserve you. I think perhaps we were always meant for each other," she said. "Perhaps the dreams were just our souls recognizing across distance what our minds had not yet accepted. I like that thought." "Of course you do. You are a romantic, Benjamin Harper." "I am practical," he protested. "Practical men do not ride across two territories following dreams. You are a romantic whether you admit it or not." He could not argue with that. Their life together settled into a rhythm that felt both comfortable and exciting. Benjamin took a permanent position helping to manage the livery stable, work that paid well and suited his skills with animals. His afternoons were still spent at the bookshop, which had expanded its inventory to include writing supplies and maps, items that sold well in a frontier town. Sophia taught him to read with greater fluency, and he discovered a love for history and exploration narratives. She would curl up beside him in the evenings while he practiced reading aloud, gently correcting his pronunciation and explaining unfamiliar concepts. "You are a natural scholar," she told him one night after he had successfully navigated a particularly dense passage about the Louisiana Purchase. "Your mind is hungry for knowledge. It simply was never given the opportunity to feast before." "I had a good teacher back in Kansas who tried," Benjamin said, "but I was young and foolish and thought practical skills were the only ones that mattered. I wish I could thank him now for the foundation he gave me, even if I did not appreciate it at the time." Spring arrived, and with it came renewed growth in Fort Davis. The town was establishing itself as a trading hub, positioned strategically between El Paso and San Antonio. More families arrived, drawn by accounts of good water and fertile land in the surrounding valleys. The bookshop thrived, and Sophia began ordering inventory from publishers in New York and Philadelphia, becoming known throughout West Texas as the woman who could acquire almost any book given enough time. Benjamin expanded the stable to accommodate the increased traffic, hiring 2 young men to help with the work. He found he enjoyed the responsibility of running a business, the challenge of solving problems and building something lasting. In June, Sophia told him she was pregnant. Benjamin had been repairing a fence behind their house when she came out with the news, her face glowing with a mixture of joy and nervousness. For a moment, he simply stood there, hammer forgotten in his hand, trying to process what she had said. "We are going to have a baby." His voice sounded strange to his own ears. "In February, according to my calculations." "Are you pleased?" Benjamin dropped the hammer and crossed to her in 3 long strides, lifting her carefully and spinning her around while she laughed. "Pleased? Sophia, I am beyond words. We are going to be parents. I was afraid you might think it too soon." He set her down gently, his hands framing her face. "There is no such thing as too soon for something this miraculous. We are going to have a child, a person who is part you and part me. How could I be anything but overjoyed?" The pregnancy progressed well, though Sophia found the summer heat exhausting. Benjamin fussed over her constantly, earning both exasperation and affection for his attentiveness. He installed a fan in the bookshop and insisted she rest every afternoon. He brought her cool drinks and read to her when she was too tired to hold a book herself. The community rallied around them as Sophia's condition became obvious. Mrs. Chen shared pregnancy wisdom from her own experiences, raising 4 children. The doctor who had taken over her father's practice examined Sophia regularly and proclaimed her healthy, though he cautioned that the old hip injury might complicate delivery. "I am aware," Sophia said calmly. "My father prepared me for this possibility years ago. We will manage." Benjamin tried not to let fear overwhelm him, but the thought of anything happening to Sophia filled him with terror. She seemed to sense his worry and took his hand one evening as they sat together watching the sunset from their porch. "Benjamin, I need you to trust that I am strong enough for this. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I will not claim it is without risk, but I have excellent care and a healthy constitution despite my leg. We will meet our child in February, and we will be fine." "I would be lost without you," he admitted. "Good thing you will not have to find out then." Her confidence helped, though Benjamin still found himself praying more fervently than he had since childhood. Autumn brought cooler weather and renewed energy for Sophia. Her belly swelled, and Benjamin found himself talking to their unborn child when they were alone, telling stories about the world the baby would enter, making promises about the love and security they would provide. "I will teach you to ride," he said one night with his hand on Sophia's belly. "And your mother will teach you to read. Between us, you will be equipped for anything life brings. We will teach the baby that love matters more than convention," Sophia added, "and that courage sometimes means following your heart even when it seems illogical." Winter settled over Fort Davis, bringing cold nights and occasional snow. The bookshop stayed busy as people sought indoor entertainment during the darker months. Benjamin worked tirelessly to ensure they had enough money saved for when the baby arrived, and Sophia would need to reduce her hours at the shop. Christmas was celebrated with their found family in Fort Davis. Mrs. Chen hosted dinner. Reverend Morrison led them in carols. The blacksmith gave them a cradle he had crafted in his spare time, the wood polished until it gleamed and carved with delicate patterns along the sides. "This is too fine," Benjamin protested, running his hand over the smooth wood. Nothing is too fine for the first baby born to people who found each other through dreams, the blacksmith replied. Your story gives the rest of us hope that magic still exists in this world. February arrived, and with it came the first signs that the baby was coming. Sophia's labor began on a Tuesday afternoon while she was reorganizing the poetry section. Benjamin was at the stable when Mrs. Chen's son came running to fetch him. Miss Sophia says the baby is coming now, the boy gasped out, having sprinted the entire way. Benjamin left the stable in the care of his assistants and ran through the streets of Fort Davis, his heart pounding. He found Sophia at home, calm despite the obvious pain she was experiencing. The doctor was already there, as was Mrs. Chen, who had delivered more babies than the doctor despite lacking formal training. Benjamin, Sophia said when she saw him, reaching out her hand. Meet me on the other side of this. He gripped her hand tightly. I am not going anywhere. The labor was long and difficult, just as the doctor had warned it might be. Sophia's old hip injury complicated things, and there were moments when Benjamin saw fear flicker across the doctor's face. But Sophia was strong, stronger than Benjamin had imagined possible, bearing the pain with gritted determination. You can do this, he told her over and over, wiping sweat from her forehead, holding her hand through the contractions. You are the strongest person I know. Finally, after nearly 20 hours, a baby's cry filled the room. The doctor lifted a small, wrinkled, perfect infant into the air. It is a boy, he announced. Benjamin looked at Sophia, who was crying and laughing simultaneously, reaching for their son. The doctor placed the baby on her chest, and Benjamin saw his wife transform in that instant into a mother, her face glowing with a love so intense it seemed to light the room. Hello, little one, she whispered. We have been waiting for you. Their son had dark hair and had inherited Sophia's green eyes, though the doctor assured them all babies were born with blue eyes that might change. He was healthy and vocal, expressing his displeasure at being thrust into the cold world with impressive lung capacity. What should we name him? Benjamin asked, his finger caught in the baby's tiny fist. Sophia looked up at him, exhaustion and joy mingling in her expression. Thomas, after my father. Thomas Benjamin Harper. Thomas, Benjamin repeated, testing the name. Their son seemed to settle at the sound, his cries quieting to soft snuffles. Welcome to the world, Thomas. The months that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming love. Benjamin discovered reserves of patience he had not known he possessed, walking Thomas through the house at 3 in the morning when the baby refused to sleep, changing diapers with hands more accustomed to rope and leather, learning to read Sophia stories while he rocked their son in the beautiful cradle. Sophia recovered well from the birth, though she tired more easily now. The bookshop remained open, but she hired a young woman named Margaret to help during the day so she could bring Thomas to work and care for him without neglecting customers. Fort Davis embraced young Thomas Harper with enthusiasm. He was passed from neighbor to neighbor, cooed over and blessed and predicted to have a great future by people who had known his parents since they first fell in love. He will be the first child of Fort Davis to grow up surrounded by books, Reverend Morrison said, bouncing Thomas on his knee. Imagine what that will mean for his education. Benjamin could imagine it, and the thought filled him with pride and hope. Thomas grew quickly, reaching for things with chubby hands, babbling in sounds that Benjamin and Sophia convinced themselves were almost words. They took him on walks through the town, Benjamin carrying his son while pointing out horses and wagons and mountains. Sophia sang to him constantly, the lullabies of her childhood mixed with new songs she made up as she went. When Thomas was 6 months old, Sophia told Benjamin she wanted to expand the bookshop. "What kind of expansion?" Benjamin asked. They were in bed, Thomas finally asleep in his cradle beside them, the house quiet except for the wind outside. "I want to create a lending library. Many people cannot afford to purchase books, but they still deserve access to them. If we set aside a section where people could borrow books for a small fee, we could increase literacy throughout the entire region." Benjamin considered this. "It would require more space and more inventory." "I know. That is why I wanted to discuss it with you. It would be a significant investment, but it aligns with what you have always believed, that education should not be restricted by wealth." Benjamin turned to face her in the darkness. "If you believe this is important, then we will find a way to make it happen. We have some savings, but not enough. We would need to take out a loan." "Then we take out a loan. The bookshop is profitable. We can manage the payments." He kissed her forehead. "Your dreams are just as important as mine were, Sophia. More important, actually, because yours help entire communities instead of just one lovesick cowboy." She laughed softly. "I love you, Benjamin Harper. I love you too. Now tell me your plans for this library so I can start figuring out how to build it." The project consumed them for the next several months. Benjamin negotiated with the owner of the building next to the bookshop, eventually purchasing it outright. He spent his evenings after work at the stable knocking down the wall between the two spaces, creating one large room. Sophia cataloged inventory and corresponded with publishers, negotiating better rates for bulk orders. The lending library opened in November 1884, nearly 2 years after Benjamin had first arrived in Fort Davis. The celebration was attended by most of the town, people eager to see what the Harpers had created. The space was beautiful, with tall windows letting in light and comfortable chairs scattered throughout where people could sit and read. The shelves were organized by subject, with clear labels that even children could understand. Anyone with a permanent address in Fort Davis or the surrounding area can borrow up to 3 books at a time, Sophia announced to the gathered crowd. The fee is 10 cents per book per month, or you can purchase an annual membership for $2 that allows unlimited borrowing. Children under 12 can borrow for free if their parents are members. The response was overwhelming. Within a week, they had 50 memberships sold. Within a month, that number had doubled. People who had never owned a book suddenly had access to hundreds. Children who had been taught basic reading but never had material to practice with were devouring adventure stories and fairy tales. Farmers and ranchers borrowed agricultural texts and shared knowledge with their neighbors. The lending library transformed Fort Davis in ways Benjamin could not have predicted. Discussion groups formed spontaneously, people gathering to debate books they had read. Literacy rates increased as parents were motivated to improve their reading so they could help their children. Even the saloon saw changes, with men arguing about Shakespeare and Dickens instead of just politics and cattle prices. "You did this," Benjamin told Sophia one evening as they walked through the library after closing, Thomas toddling between them on unsteady legs. "You changed this town." "We did this," she corrected. "I had the vision, but you made it physical reality. That matters just as much." They stood there surrounded by books and possibilities, watching their son explore the world with fearless curiosity, and Benjamin felt a contentment so complete it was almost overwhelming. Life continued its rhythm. Thomas grew into a bright, inquisitive toddler who seemed to inherit his mother's love of stories and his father's practical nature. He would sit for hours looking at picture books, pointing at illustrations and demanding explanations. Benjamin taught him to recognize horses and cattle. Sophia taught him his letters before he turned 3. The bookshop and library continued to thrive, becoming central to Fort Davis's identity. When people from other towns asked what made Fort Davis special, residents would mention the Kensington Library, as it had come to be called despite Sophia's protests that it should be called the Harper Library. "You were Kensington when you dreamed of it," Mrs. Chen said firmly. So Kensington it remains. In the spring of 1886, Sophia told Benjamin she was pregnant again. Thomas was 3.5, old enough to be excited about the prospect of a sibling even if he did not fully understand what it meant. "A baby?" he asked, his small hand on Sophia's still flat stomach. "Like me, smaller than you," Benjamin explained. "Babies start very tiny and then grow bigger, just like you did. Can I teach the baby about horses? Eventually, yes." This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Sophia knew what to expect and was not trying to work quite as frantically. Margaret had proven herself capable of managing the library most days, and Sophia allowed herself to rest more, to enjoy the experience instead of fighting through it. Their daughter was born in November, arriving quickly and with far less drama than Thomas's birth. She had Benjamin's dark hair and Sophia's delicate features, and when she opened her eyes for the first time, they were a striking gray that the doctor said might turn brown or might stay that unusual shade. "Rose," Sophia said immediately. "Rose Margaret Harper, after your assistant who has been such a help." Benjamin agreed, and when they told Margaret the news, the young woman cried with happiness at the honor. Rose was a quieter baby than Thomas had been, content to watch the world with solemn eyes. Thomas was fascinated by his sister, wanting to help with everything even when his help was more hindrance. Benjamin and Sophia navigated the chaos of two young children with humor and teamwork, dividing responsibilities and supporting each other through the exhausting early months. Fort Davis continued to grow and prosper. The town incorporated officially in 1887, electing its first mayor and town council. Benjamin was asked to serve on the council, a request he accepted after discussing it with Sophia. "You have a good head for practical matters," she said. "And you care about this community. Your voice would be valuable." As a council member, Benjamin worked on issues ranging from water rights to road maintenance to education standards. He pushed for the town to fund a proper schoolhouse, arguing that the informal education happening in people's homes and at the library needed to be supplemented with structured learning. "We have children growing up here who deserve the same opportunities as children back east," he said at a town meeting. "That requires investment in education." The schoolhouse was approved and built, opening in 1888 with a teacher recruited from St. Louis. Thomas was among the first students, excited to join the bigger children even though at 5, he was among the youngest enrolled. Sophia took on the role of school board member, ensuring that the curriculum included literature and critical thinking alongside the basic reading, writing, and arithmetic. She donated books from the library for classroom use and worked with the teacher to develop lesson plans that would engage students rather than simply drill them. Benjamin watched his wife flourish in this role, her passion for education finding new outlets. He watched his children grow, Thomas becoming more confident and articulate, Rose developing a quiet strength that reminded him of Sophia. He worked at the stable and on the town council and built things with his hands, always making sure his family felt loved and secure. The years passed in a blur of ordinary moments that accumulated into an extraordinary life. Thomas learned to ride when he was 6, Benjamin leading him around the corral on a gentle mare while the boy whooped with delight. Rose learned to read at 4, sitting with her mother and sounding out words with serious concentration. They added a second story to their house, creating more space as the children grew. In 1891, when Benjamin was 36 and Sophia 33, they celebrated 9 years of marriage with a quiet dinner at home. The children were staying with Mrs. Chen for the night, giving Benjamin and Sophia rare time alone. "You ever regret it?" Benjamin asked as they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. "Following a foolish cowboy who found you through dreams." Sophia turned to look at him, and in her eyes he saw the same love and recognition that had been there the first moment they met. "Not for a single second. You gave me everything I did not know I was missing. Adventure and partnership and children and a life that matters. How could I regret any of that? I followed instinct across 2 territories and found everything I needed," Benjamin said. "Sometimes I still cannot believe my luck. Not luck, fate, destiny, whatever you want to call it. We were meant to find each other, Benjamin Harper, and we have built something beautiful." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined as darkness settled over Fort Davis. Through the window, they could see the lights of the library still burning, people inside reading and learning and growing. Beyond that, the town they had helped build and nurture, full of people they cared about and who cared for them in return. Benjamin thought about the man he had been when he left Santa Fe, uncertain and following nothing more substantial than dreams. He thought about the journey that had led him here, to this porch with this woman and this life. It seemed impossible that simple instinct could have guided him so perfectly, yet here was the proof surrounding him on all sides. "Thank you for existing," he whispered to Sophia. "Thank you for finding me," she replied. The children grew older, and with age came new challenges and joys. Thomas showed an aptitude for mathematics that surprised both his parents, solving complex problems in his head while Benjamin struggled to follow the logic. Rose developed her mother's love of literature, but added to it a gift for storytelling, spinning elaborate tales for anyone who would listen. In 1893, Sophia's library received recognition from the Texas Library Association, which had formed 2 years earlier. They sent a representative to Fort Davis to study how a lending library operated successfully in a frontier town. The representative, a stern woman from Austin named Mrs. Bradford, spent 3 days examining the operation and interviewing patrons. "This is remarkable," she finally admitted to Sophia. "You have achieved literacy rates that rival cities 10 times the size. How did you do it?" "By believing that everyone deserves access to knowledge," Sophia replied simply. "And by building a community that shares that belief." Mrs. Bradford's report led to other towns establishing similar lending libraries throughout Texas and the broader West. Sophia began receiving letters asking for advice, and she spent hours crafting detailed responses explaining her methods and philosophy. "You are changing more than just Fort Davis now," Benjamin told her. "Your influence is spreading. Good. The more people who have access to books, the better our society becomes. Education creates opportunity, and opportunity creates hope." Benjamin loved her fierce conviction, the way she refused to accept that the status quo was good enough. When Thomas turned 12, he asked if he could work at the stable with his father. Benjamin agreed, teaching his son the same skills that had served him so well. They worked side by side, Benjamin explaining how to read an animal's temperament, how to approach a spooked horse, how to repair tack and maintain equipment. "Why did you become a cowboy?" Thomas asked one day while they were cleaning stalls. Benjamin paused, considering how to answer. "It was the work available, and I was good at it. But I think I was also searching for something, even if I did not know what. I needed to understand myself before I could find where I belonged. And you belong here." "I belong with your mother and you and your sister," Benjamin said. "The location matters less than the people." Thomas absorbed this wisdom silently, and Benjamin saw him becoming a thoughtful young man, someone who would question and analyze before making decisions. Rose, at 9, spent most of her time at the library, helping her mother and reading voraciously. She announced one day that she wanted to be a writer, and Sophia immediately began teaching her about story structure and character development. "You have a gift," Sophia told her daughter, "but gifts require discipline and practice to flourish. Write every day, even when you do not feel inspired." Rose took this advice seriously, filling notebook after notebook with stories about brave girls and adventure and magic. Benjamin would find her scribbling away at odd hours, so absorbed in her imaginary worlds that she did not notice him watching. In 1895, Fort Davis celebrated 20 years since the fort's closure and the town's transformation into a civilian community. The celebration lasted 3 days, with speeches and music and displays honoring the families who had built the town into what it had become. Benjamin and Sophia were asked to speak at the main ceremony, recognition of how much they had contributed to Fort Davis's growth. They stood together on the platform that had been erected in the town square, looking out at hundreds of faces, many of whom they knew by name. 20 years ago, this town faced an uncertain future, Benjamin began. The fort that had been its reason for existence was closing. Many people left, believing there was nothing here worth staying for, but some of you stayed. You believed this place was worth fighting for, worth building into something new. And you did it. You created a community that values education and cooperation and taking care of each other. Sophia continued, her voice carrying clearly across the square. Fort Davis has taught me that home is not about where you come from, but about where you choose to invest yourself. My husband followed dreams to find me here, and together, we have built a life that exceeds anything I could have imagined. That is the gift of this place. It allows you to become more than you thought possible. The applause was thunderous, and Benjamin saw tears on many faces. After the speeches, people came up to thank them, sharing stories about how the library had changed their lives or their children's futures. "My son is going to college in Austin next year," one farmer said, gripping Benjamin's hand tightly. "That would never have happened without access to the books he needed to prepare. You gave him that chance." "Your wife gave him that chance," Benjamin corrected. "I just built the shelves." "You built more than shelves, Mr. Harper. You helped build a community that values learning. That is no small thing." As the celebration continued into the evening, Benjamin stood with Sophia, watching Thomas dance with a girl from his school and Rose showing her notebooks to anyone interested. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, the dream that had seemed like madness but had led to everything meaningful in his life. "What are you thinking?" Sophia asked, leaning against his shoulder. "That I would do it all again. Every mile, every moment of doubt, every instant of fear, all of it was worth it to end up here with you." "We were lucky," Sophia said. "No, we were brave enough to trust in something bigger than logic. That is different from luck." The years continued their steady march forward. Thomas graduated from school at 16 and surprised his parents by announcing he wanted to attend college in Austin, studying engineering. Benjamin and Sophia supported his decision, proud of his ambition even as they worried about him leaving Fort Davis for the first time. "He will be fine," Sophia assured Benjamin as they watched their son pack for the journey. "We raised him to be curious and confident. Those qualities will serve him well." Thomas left in the fall of 1897, and the house felt emptier without his presence. But he wrote letters regularly, describing his classes and the city and the future he was building for himself. Benjamin saved every letter, marveling at how the small boy he had taught to ride had become this articulate young man. Rose continued her writing, and when she was 14, she submitted a story to a magazine published in New York. To everyone's astonishment except Sophia's, the magazine accepted it and paid Rose $5 for the piece. "I am a published author," Rose announced, waving the acceptance letter triumphantly. "You are indeed," Sophia said, hugging her daughter tightly. "And this is only the beginning." Benjamin watched his children pursue their dreams with the same determination Sophia had shown in building her library. He saw himself and his wife in them, the practical mixed with the ambitious, the careful blended with the bold. In 1900, Benjamin turned 45 and Sophia 42. They had been married 17 years, and Benjamin loved her more deeply than he had thought possible when they first met. The passion of their early days had matured into something richer, a love that encompassed shared history and mutual respect, and the deep comfort of truly knowing another person. Thomas returned from Austin with his engineering degree and announced he was accepting a job with the railroad, helping to plan new routes through West Texas. He would be based in Fort Davis, at least initially, which filled Benjamin with quiet joy. "I went away and saw the world," Thomas explained over dinner. "And I realized that what we have here is special. I want to help Fort Davis grow while preserving what makes it unique." "You sound like your mother," Benjamin said, smiling. "I take that as the highest compliment." Rose also chose to stay close to home, at least for now. At 17, she was selling stories regularly and had attracted the attention of a publisher interested in collecting her work into a book. She continued to help at the library, teaching younger children and leading writing workshops. "Eventually, I may need to go to New York or Boston to pursue publishing more seriously," she told her parents. "But not yet. I am not finished learning from this place." The new century brought changes to Fort Davis and the broader world. The railroad expansion Thomas worked on connected the town more directly to major cities, making travel and shipping easier. The library expanded again, requiring Benjamin to purchase another adjacent building and repeat his wall removal expertise. Sophia's hair was now streaked with gray, and Benjamin's hands were marked with the calluses and scars of decades of physical work. They moved a bit slower than they once had, but their minds remained sharp and their love remained strong. In 1902, Benjamin and Sophia became grandparents when Thomas married a woman named Clara, whom he had met in Austin, and they had a son they named Benjamin Thomas Harper Roman II. Holding his grandson for the first time, Benjamin felt the circle complete itself, the continuation of the family he and Sophia had created. "He has your eyes," Sophia said, looking at the baby with the besotted expression of a new grandmother. "And Thomas's nose," Benjamin replied. "Poor child." They settled into the role of grandparents with enthusiasm, spoiling young Benjamin in ways they had been too practical to spoil their own children. Sophia read to him from the time he was weeks old, convinced that early exposure to language would shape his development. Benjamin carved him toys and took him to the stable to see the horses as soon as he could walk. Rose announced her engagement in 1903 to a teacher who had moved to Fort Davis to work at the school. His name was James Mitchell, and he shared Rose's love of literature and education. The wedding was held in the library, surrounded by books and the people who had become family over the years. "I am happy," Rose told Sophia on her wedding day. "James sees me the way Father sees you, like I am the most important person in the world." "Then he is worthy of you," Sophia replied, adjusting her daughter's veil with careful hands. Benjamin walked Rose down the aisle between the shelves of books, and when he placed her hand in James's, he he felt both loss and joy. His daughter was beginning her own adventure, building her own life, and he had given her the tools and confidence to do so successfully. The years of their 50s passed in a gentle cascade. Benjamin retired from the town council, but continued to work at the stable, training younger men to take over, when he could no longer manage the physical demands. Sophia reduced her hours at the library, trusting Margaret and a staff of assistants to handle daily operations while she focused on acquisitions and planning. They took walks together every evening, holding hands like young lovers while discussing the day's events and the future's possibilities. They watched their grandchildren grow, Benjamin Roman II joined by a sister named Sophia Clara, and then by Rose's children, twin boys named Henry and William. "We did well," Sophia said one evening as they sat on their porch, the same porch where they had spent countless evenings over the past 25 years. "We built something that will outlast us." "We did," Benjamin agreed, "though I hope we have many years left to enjoy it." "As do I. But whenever my time comes, I want you to know that you gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams. That cowboy who followed his heart across 2 territories gave me everything." Benjamin kissed her softly. "You were the dream, Sophia. Everything else was just the journey to find you." They celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary in 1913, surrounded by children and grandchildren and friends who had been with them throughout the journey. The celebration was held in the library, naturally, and people shared stories about how Benjamin and Sophia's love story had inspired them to take risks and trust in possibilities. "You made us believe in magic," Mrs. Chen said, now elderly but still sharp. "Two people drawn together by dreams, building a life that changed an entire community. That is the kind of story that reminds us why we are all here." Benjamin looked at Sophia across the crowded room, seeing not just the woman she was now but all the versions of her he had known. The young bookshop owner he had first met, the bride in her simple wedding dress, the mother holding their newborn children, the passionate advocate fighting for education, the grandmother reading to small children. All of her, every moment, treasured. In 1915, Benjamin turned 60 and officially retired from the stable, handing over operations to a younger man who had apprenticed under him for years. Sophia also stepped back from daily library management, though she still came in regularly to select new acquisitions and advise on difficult decisions. They spent their days in quiet contentment, reading together in their home, playing with grandchildren, taking slow walks through the town they had helped build. Benjamin's hands were gnarled with arthritis now, and Sophia's limp was more pronounced, her hip causing increasing pain as she aged. But they faced these challenges together, as they had faced everything. On a spring morning in 1918, Benjamin woke to find Sophia had not risen yet, unusual for someone who had always been an early riser. He touched her shoulder gently, then with more urgency when she did not respond. Her skin was cool, her face peaceful, and he knew with terrible certainty that she was gone. The grief was overwhelming, a physical pain that made it hard to breathe. Benjamin sat beside her for a long time, holding her hand and remembering 35 years of love and partnership. She had been 60, not old by some standards, but the hard life of the frontier took its toll. Thomas and Rose came quickly when they received word, and they grieved together, sharing memories and supporting each other through the loss. The funeral was attended by hundreds, people traveling from across Texas to pay respects to the woman who had changed so many lives. "She taught me to read," one elderly Mexican man said, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I was 40 years old, and she spent hours teaching me because she believed I deserved that skill." That kindness changed my entire family's future. Story after story emerged, testaments to Sophia's generosity and vision. Benjamin listened to them all, grateful that others had recognized what he had always known. That Sophia Kensington Harper was extraordinary. In the months after Sophia's death, Benjamin struggled to find purpose. The house felt too empty, the silence too complete. But his children refused to let him sink into despair. "Mother would not want you to give up," Rose said firmly. "She would want you to live fully until your last breath." So Benjamin forced himself to engage with life. He spent time with his grandchildren, teaching them the skills he had taught their parents. He went to the library regularly, sitting in the chair Sophia had favored and feeling close to her, surrounded by the books she had loved. He also began to write, finally using the skills Sophia had worked so hard to teach him. He wrote about their life together, about the dreams that had brought him to Fort Davis, about the love that had sustained them through decades. The writing was not polished or literary, but it was honest, and Rose encouraged him to continue. "This is important," she said after reading his pages. "This is a record of something remarkable. Keep writing, Father." Benjamin lived for 7 more years after Sophia's death, years filled with family and memory, and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. He watched his grandchildren grow into young adults. He saw the library expand yet again, now serving not just Fort Davis but the entire region through a network of borrowing arrangements with other towns. In the spring of 1925, Benjamin died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 69. He was buried beside Sophia in the Fort Davis Cemetery, their gravestones simple but inscribed with words that captured their essence. Benjamin Harper, 1855–1925. He followed his heart and found his home. Sophia Kensington Harper, 1858–1918. She believed knowledge could change the world, and she proved it. The Kensington Library continued to operate, eventually becoming the Kensington Harper Memorial Library in honor of both its founders. Thomas and Rose ensured their parents' vision lived on, expanding services and maintaining the commitment to education and accessibility that had been at the library's heart from the beginning. The story of the cowboy who followed dreams across 2 territories to find the woman from his dreams running a bookshop became legend in Fort Davis, passed down through generations as an example of the magic that could happen when people were brave enough to trust in more than just logic and reason. Thomas Benjamin Harper Roman II grew up hearing stories about his grandparents and chose to become a librarian himself, dedicating his career to expanding literacy programs throughout Texas. Rose's children became writers and teachers, carrying forward the family's commitment to education and storytelling. By the time the 20th century reached its midpoint, the Kensington Harper Memorial Library was known throughout the Southwest as a model for how community institutions could transform lives. Scholars studied its history, trying to understand what had made it so successful. They analyzed acquisition strategies and lending policies and organizational structures. But those who had known Benjamin and Sophia understood that the library's success had nothing to do with systems and everything to do with love. Love for knowledge, love for community, and most importantly, the love between 2 people who had been willing to believe in something impossible and make it real. The bookshop where they had first met was preserved as part of the library complex, maintained exactly as it had been in 1882, when a dusty cowboy had walked through the door and found his destiny. People visited it like a shrine, standing in the spot where Benjamin had first seen Sophia and imagining that moment of recognition. Because that was what the story truly was about: recognition. two souls recognizing each other across distance and circumstance, drawn together by forces that transcended explanation. They had built something beautiful from that recognition, not just a marriage, but an entire community infrastructure that would serve people for generations. In Fort Davis, parents still told their children about the cowboy and the bookshop owner, using the story to teach lessons about courage and love, and the importance of following your heart, even when it seemed foolish. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the light hit just right, people swore they could see two figures walking hand in hand through the library, still together even in whatever came after, still building something beautiful. The dreams that had brought Benjamin Harper across two territories had been more than simple nighttime visions. They had been prophecy and promise, a glimpse of the future calling him forward to claim it. He had answered that call, and in doing so, had created something that would echo through time. And every book borrowed, every child taught to read, every life changed by access to knowledge was a testament to the fact that sometimes the most impractical decisions lead to the most profound impacts. That love, when it is real and true and strong, can build wonders that last long after the lovers themselves have gone. Benjamin and Sophia's story became the story of Fort Davis itself, woven into the town's identity as thoroughly as the mountains that surrounded it. And perhaps that was the greatest testament of all, that two people, drawn together by dreams and love, had left a mark so deep that it became inseparable from the place they had chosen to call home.